This video will be very random, little bits that I was going to delete, and just to show how random, we're going to begin with making fried rice. Failure can be a positive thing, such as the failure to be conditioned. If you're watching these videos, you have probably failed to be properly conditioned. And if you were successfully conditioned, you'd be off doing something else, some part of your program. And personally, I can see how the program was unsuccessful in my conditioning at a young age. And this inability to be conditioned is initially very uncomfortable. I think we would call this not fitting in. And what was very uncomfortable in the past is now replaced with gratitude. In the way I see it now, if the program fails, then we are free. Free to run our natural program, in which all is possible. Welcome. So I was very upset that I didn't make my case the way I wish I would have. And if you watch this last video, I proposed that this old mining site from the 1860s may have been some not only castle, but infrastructure, a dam, other buildings, perhaps a whole city. And it wasn't until it was all over with that I found this picture. And this really reminded me of what we were seeing here. I think they call these turrets. Regardless, a grand wall on the outskirts, tons of buildings surrounding a larger one, as seen here. And perhaps this exact setting is the original foundation for all cities. We seem to see these walkways and massive canal walls. And even though the entire cities throughout our realm have been repurposed, we still see this footprint, this elevation change. And in modern times, this building represents an entire block, several dozen individual buildings and retail shops. But nevertheless, that's what I think we're seeing out here in this old Silver City, Utah, 1860s mine. Not seeming like a mine at all, and just too much care and preparation taken for this very short-lived mine. And here I wanted to show a ghost city in Turkey. And this I do think is modern construction, but very fascinating, seeming as if Turkey and the surrounding regions really may be the hub of the old world and Tartaria. And just to imagine that in this modern day and age, people are still constructing in this fashion. And I was absolutely impressed. And I'm not sure about the stories we get for all of these ghost cities. This one in particular was due to a large financial crash in Turkey. Looking very fishy, reminding us of things we've seen in China and in Turkmenistan, in the capital city called Ashgabat, and so many others. These, of course, are smaller residences, not like what we see in China. Entire cities full of skyscrapers, enough to house millions. And as we looked in another Chinese city, they have recreated Paris, complete with Eiffel Tower. Very suspicious and equally fascinating at the same time. And this was something that was shared by Dustin Bushwhacking. And this is a water pumping station. Water pumping station on the border of the US and Canada. If we zoom out a little bit, we can see that we're in the city of Buffalo. This pumping station in the middle of the water with a current that averages 12 miles per hour was built, we're told, in a couple years. And here we're told of this Colonel Francis Ward pumping station, and we're told about this water intake. It was built from 1908 to 1913, so 5 years, and it facilitated 100 million gallons of drinking water per day derived from Lake Erie. It's situated about a mile offshore at the head and center of the Niagara River, where the water is normally 28 feet deep. And it seems like there were several of these water intakes. I'm actually looking for another one right now, but this is a great example So they're building these out in the water in 28-foot deep waters of massive megalithic seeming block, but more realistically concrete, and not a peep about diverting the river. The water intake is connected to the pumping station by a 12-foot tunnel, 6,000 plus feet in length. And we have another one, the Porter pumping station. And these stories are just fine, but without some kind of explanation as to how you're building in 25-foot waters with a strong current. And it's not like you're just building something. You're running a tunnel and connecting it to this pumping station way over here. And here's a look at one of these original water intakes from the Bird Island Pier. And in this photo we can see what look like some massive blocks, and typically piers are built from remains of the old world. And here we can see this intake back here in the distance. And here's a look at some of the machinery associated with this pumping station. 20-foot flywheels weighing 30 tons each. Just to give you an idea of these things that they're blasting out in less than 5 years. And is this the true story, or are we looking at inherited infrastructure brought back to life? And here this guy on Reddit says, I've always had questions about the thing underneath the Peace Bridge. It kind of looks like a sunken ship with its nose sticking out. Here's a photo. And this is actually a poor photo, but he does have a point with his little silhouette. And here's a nice picture of it. And perhaps the water spilled in this way, funneling it through this tunnel under the water and supplying the city with water. And again, did they really build this? Here we're seeing an old photo, and as usual, it looks so old. We have doors up here. Really amazing. And I think this was from the old world. And in many cases, these are inoperational today. As usual, serving for a very short time, only to be abandoned and replaced with something much cheaper. And here Dustin was showing us some nice pictures as he was chatting with Campbell, and it was showing construction photos of the Erie Canal. And here we go, some more of these massive megalithic blocks, and we can compare this to the blocks that were once shared with us by IRS media, and we can see those here, and these seeming very similar, seeming to be the foundation of our realm, as if everything was laid out before there was any dirt or mud or even water. Someone carefully prepared this realm, similar to what we're seeing with the ghost cities found throughout. And again, this is a construction photo, and we already have bushes growing in the cracks. And these are very tight blocks. The resolution isn't as good as I took the screenshots from my phone, but we can see irregular shaped blocks, and where it fits so tight, no grass or bush could grow in the crack. And the first time I ever saw shrubbery growing in megalithic blocks was at the Great Wall in Jerusalem, said to have been built thousands of years ago. But here, to see such things on the Erie Canal, supposedly 100 years ago. And this was just an old photo he was sharing, and I just wanted to show the massive blocks again with some frame of reference. And I think you could show this picture to a child and they would agree that this is not new construction, not the canal, not the buildings. And here 10 years later, the canal is filled in and the buildings are still in ruin. We can see where their priorities were. And I was already pretty certain, but after seeing these pictures, there was no shadow of a doubt. No way did these people build this canal. Everything we see is so old and beyond their abilities. This canal is two-tiered and seeming to be built entirely of concrete at the base here. And I think there must have been beautiful castles and structures of the old world. And now we're just seeing ruins and some modern buildings that the inheritors have built of wood. And here again, at best, just cleaning the canal out. And even this would be a big job for these people. And finally, another look at this water intake. Just mind-blowing. And so much to focus on in this city. But for today, I thought I would just scratch the surface. And this part was pretty interesting, but my microphone was not plugged in. I've sat on this for a month or so, and I thought I would share it. And this is a little share by Zen Atman, and I thank you, Zen. Told me to check out the Palace, Al Farid. Here it says the place. Not really sure, but we've all seen pictures of this before. Something seeming reminiscent to Petra in Jordan. Yet this is about as random as they get. Is this anomaly packaged with a good explanation? Let's see. The Hegra is an archaeological site in Hejaz, Saudi Arabia. The majority of the remains date from the Nabatean kingdom in the 1st century AD. The site constitutes the kingdom's southmost and largest settlement after Petra, its capital, again referring to this Nabatean kingdom, and in 2008 it was made a UNESCO heritage site. It was chosen for its well-preserved remains from late antiquity, especially the 131 rock-cut tombs with their ornamental facades. So this is today's tomb. Who knew tombs were so exciting? Some of my favorite tidbits. And according to Islamic texts, these people were punished by Allah for their practice of idol worship, and they were struck with earthquakes and lightning blasts. And the site has a reputation as being cursed. They're trying to overcome this and draw in some tourism. So I guess we can say this is a mystery as far as the mainstream is concerned. No talk about construction or what kind of other explanation could be given. We are told they were blasted with lightning and earthquakes, part of the truth. However, they tell us these are rock cut. Even if they were rock cut, still wouldn't work with our timeline. Built in the 1st century, laser-like precision, where's all the remains? If it was cut, and if it was melted, a very strange melt, almost looking like some acid or elemental reaction that would cause this to swell and balloon out. And is it the case where all of these have the same side that's preserved? That would be interesting to find out. And here, let's have a little perspective from the air. Here we go. Are we looking at 2 different resets here? The first reset, rendering a building into a blob. And the second wave, we have the brilliant facaders who came in with some futuristic technology, at least to us, and did carve it with some laser-like precision. Perhaps they were trying to access the treasures in this former reset surviving building, really seeming like this had a concrete footer and foundation, and the top may have been brick. And I have hypothesized something like this in the past, whereas all mining sites simply be people finding access to the inside of these devastated buildings of old. I'm really not sure, just a theory, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this unexplained, even by the mainstream, site. I could tie this theory into the Nazca idea, where clearly somebody seems to have been performing a job, making grids, perhaps surveying the land for mining operations, or who knows, and then just doodling a little bit on the side, perhaps calibrating their instruments and drawing a hummingbird or a spider. Or maybe those depictions have a greater meaning, such as depicting our luminaries above. Either way, we're talking about super high-tech in a supposed very early time period. And here's another little picture. And in this picture, really seeming melted. I can almost see little openings under here. And I'm sure if this site was excavated, it may reveal more. We can really see the flow and how this may even have had a pyramid-like taper to it here, supporting this massive building. What do we see up here? Perhaps another little window. And if that is the case, then why did these parts survive? Did these tapering buttresses deflect the energy around them? And I can almost imagine this beautiful building now. Hundreds of little windows along this part, and this would have been the grand entrance to the building. And here again, there would have been hundreds of little openings, and we can see that also back here. All smaller living quarters, and this being a grand center. And we can almost see the triangle shape here on its left, and there may have been windows all along, now fused together. And I love these pictures that we don't usually get to see. Very fascinating. And I'm I'm trying to get a look at the inside of these tombs, and here we go. And this stone really looking like it may have been made of something else and turned to stone. Even up here, what looks like piping, maybe just molding. And again, I apologize for that poor audio. And in conclusion, I really do think that's what we're seeing here. 2 waves of reset. Somebody has come in, bored into this original melted building, and refacaded it as they cleaned it up. And this next part is just a little rant on mining. The real gold rush. I have no doubt now that the real gold rush was a great inheritance, waltzing into these cities and pillaging whatever they could find. At first, valuables in all the building, clothing, jewelry, precious metals. Later turning to the buildings themselves, tearing off ornamentation. And finally, once all the buildings and belongings had been claimed, they turned to the buildings themselves in disrepair and began tearing these down, reusing the bricks, and you have the beginning of recycled resources. And in cases where the buildings did not fare well and were completely wiped out, turned to rubble, turned to stone, resembling mountain, again there were belongings, precious wonders in these wondrous buildings, reduced to rubble, and in some cases openings remaining, such as with the Grand Canyon, certain spots with access and tales back in the 1900s of finding treasures and gold in these supposed canyon walls. And we end up with so many municipal buildings and churches that can't be justified in the numbers, so they tear them down in modern times, putting up apartment buildings and profiting off the very land itself, the last resource. And in this early time period, if somebody knew what we know before everything had been taken, they would consider themselves very fortunate. And really, I think this is the real gold rush, the true gold rush. From the photographic evidence we see, we don't get a progression from a mining town to the city it is today. What we see is an immediate, sophisticated architecture that Old West miners would have no need or care to build. And for today, that's it. I thank you so much for joining me, and do have a blessed day. Please like, comment, and subscribe.